Welcome to episode 30 of the Ready for More podcast. Today, I wanted to celebrate my 30th episode by giving you some highlights from the first 14 guests that I had on this show. Welcome to the Ready for More podcast, where we share success strategies and stories for women business owners, entrepreneurs who are ready for more for yourself and for your business. I'm your host, Heather Cameron, and I'm here to help you to discover your unique path to profitability, success, so you can achieve your more on your own terms. Are you ready for more? You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. So welcome again to episode 30 of the Ready for More podcast. I'm excited to have made 30 shows. It just seems awesome to me. And when I started this podcast, 30 shows would have seemed unsurmountable. And yet it's been such an experience to talk to 14 amazing women. So the Ready for More podcast consists of a Monday morning tip, which is a solo show for me, giving you some tips on how to build your business, giving you some things to think about and things to consider as you build your business, as you grow your business, as you prepare yourself and your business for more. And the episodes are intended to be really short, easy listening that you can do on a Monday morning to just really get you thinking and see what your options are and see what you consider. The show that's released every Thursday is an interview with an awesome entrepreneurial woman. I have been so privileged to interview women all over the world and to bring you their unique stories and their unique perspective on how they became entrepreneurs, the things they struggled with, the things that made a difference to them in their business. And each of them shares with you what their business is about and what they can offer and the tips and what they can focus on. And they're so diverse in their businesses, and it's been really exciting for me to provide these stories to you. So today's episode is going to be clips from the 14 women, just to highlight some of the exceptional advice and stories that they can share with you. And I'm really looking forward to the shows that are coming up in the future. I have some amazing speakers booked and some amazing women just to really share and embrace this entrepreneurial journey with other women who are 40 plus, who are ready for more, and who have such exceptional stories to share just like yourself. So let's get started. Advice from Sophie Bennett, who was featured in episode 2, Find Your Flame.
I interviewed a guy for the book who has been to 5 Olympic Games. He's an equestrian athlete. He's the current team silver medalist from Rio and is also the coach of the current gold medalist from Rio and current world champion, European champion, and gold medal winner at London in 2012. And he actually won the team gold in London in 2012. And I interviewed him for the book because a lot of eclectic people inside the book. And I asked him what kept his motivation going after his first Olympics. It's very hard to stay at the top of your game for that long. And he said the first Olympics was all about being there. The second Olympics was all about being competitive. And he said the third Olympics was, how the heck am I going to keep this going? And he said, I suddenly realized that my sponsor was not going to be there forever. My owner was not going to be there forever. And if I wanted to keep doing this, he was only in his mid-30s at that point. He said, if I wanted to keep doing this, I had to stop expecting other people to support me. And he said, I decided to be fully responsible for my future. And that's how I got this place. And that interview was conducted at his yard in Gloucestershire, which is beautiful. It's several acres, a beautiful old period house, an indoor school. Horses live like kings. Everything's immaculate. You know, there's brass plates and beautiful saddles worth fortunes and horses worth fortunes. And he's earned all that. But he said there's no secret to it. It's about taking responsibility for deciding you want it and then executing everything.
And the last one is, what's the most important message you'd like women who are ready for more as entrepreneurs? What's the most important message you'd like to give them as a takeaway?
It's about personal boundaries and developing your self-confidence. And other people can't give that to you. You have to take it. You have to decide what you want and you have to commit to it. And you have to be prepared to take feedback and say thank you and not let it damage who you are. You know, feedback is not a knock to your identity. It's just a knock to your skills. And We can all get more skilled, but we're all good enough already. We might not be skillful enough, but we're all good enough people already. Don't need to be somebody else.
Advice from Robin Myers, who was my featured guest on episode 4, Unleash Your Potential.
You know, I talk about the 4 triggers of self-doubt. I call them the 4 H's, the helplessness, hiding, hesitation, and hypercritical talk. So all separately, it messes with us because we play a mind game to ourselves. But together, we're really setting ourselves back, right? So it's how do you stop those kind of triggers from happening? And the more you recognize that you're being negative to yourself, because we tend to be our worst enemy to ourselves and not our own best friend, yet to our friends, we would never say the things that we say to ourselves.
Absolutely.
If we can recognize when we start doing that and we stop it, you know, we just become more aware. Mm-hmm. And the more we become aware, we start, you know, shortening that cord of being nasty to ourselves.
It's true, though, because like one of the things I don't think we also see our own perspective, because if somebody reads my bio, for example, it's like, who is that? Right? You know, yeah. I have a really impressive bio. I don't always recognize that person in myself, right? Because it's just my life, right? It's my life. It's what I've lived. I've got all the sides and things that come into it. So sometimes I think even if we step back from ourselves and just look at what we've accomplished, we can really help our own self be more and be that next step that we want to go to.
Yeah, I think that's so important, you know, to say for women, whether you're starting out as an entrepreneur or you're 5 years or 10 years into your business, is that, you know, sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and sometimes it's 1 and 2, but give yourself a minute to kind of pat yourself on the back and say, like, I did it. I might not have gotten all the ways to where I thought I would get, but look where I've come.
What's the one most important message you'd like to leave our listeners with? Let them take away from our conversation.
I would say that you have the power to do anything you want at any age. You know, don't let what you think is impossible. Don't get stuck. Your impossible is totally possible, and you have total control over that. No one can take that away from you.
Advice and highlights from episode 6, where my guest was Julie Jones. Rewrite your stories. Absolutely. And if someone's done that deep thinking, so they've kind of had that yuck thought, what next? What do we do with that yuck thought?
What next? Yeah, the next thing is really the key, isn't it? What I suggest that people do, I have a trick I call a thought ladder. But you start from where you are. So this is what I'm thinking. Let's take one as an example, maybe the money one. If I make a lot of money, some of my family members are really going to have a hard time with that. It's going to cause family conflict. Let's just leave it at that. So if that is a thought that we're having, then that's where we're starting. And we think about where we would like to be. What would I rather think than that? And the trick in that is taking away all of the arguments that we're going to have about having that thought. So this is really fantasy time. If I could think anything about making money and with no consequence whatsoever, what thought would I have? And maybe we'd come up with a thought like, it is perfectly safe and wonderful for me to make a lot of money. Or everyone I know will be just as happy as I am if I make a lot of money. Whatever feels like sort of the very opposite end and feels delightful. Like when you think it, your body goes, oh, wow, that feels really great. So you have these 2 ends, where you are and where you would dearly like to be. And then what you do is try to figure out what the rungs of that ladder are. If I were going to climb towards believing that everyone in my family will be just as delighted as I am if I make a lot of money, what's a step up from it's going to cause family conflict that I can believe? Because that's the thought that I want to practice. So maybe it's something like, maybe it won't be terrible if I make a lot of money. And it can be that small, just like we were talking about with anything else, right? The step can be that small as long as it's better. And then we practice that thought. You practice it by when you start to feel that discouraged, tired feeling that you've identified as getting in your way, you interrupt yourself, you take a deep breath, and you say the new thing. You say to yourself, maybe it won't be terrible if I make a lot of money. And you just repeat it. And some people will actually write it down. We'll sit down with a journal and write it 15, 20 times. So it sort of works on the same principle that people use for affirmations. But the thing about affirmations is that they don't have to be believable. This has to be believable, because otherwise you waste your time arguing with yourself. So you have to pick a step up that's believable and just get that, get your brain rewired to think the new thought. And you'll know when it's in there. And it may still feel a little draining and a little discouraging because it's not super positive yet. And that's when you know it's time to take the next step up. What's the next better, believable thought that's closer to everyone will be as delighted as I am as if I make a lot of money?
And the last one is, what's the most important message you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think that finding a way to tell yourself and believe that you can do this is some of the most worthwhile work that you will do in building your business.
Next is highlights from episode 8 with Elena Sonino, Living Fully. Love this episode, love Elena's energy, and I want to share one of my favorite parts of the episode.
And the third thing I think for me that I've learned is that it's really, and this goes back to the not outcomes, but it's my business grows with relationships and over time. And in general, I think it's about that idea of planting seeds and harvesting, cultivating what's there for you without waiting for this big, beautiful bloom to emerge in the way that, it's supposed to, it should, but really, so planting seeds and cultivating what's there along the way. So those are three things that are very interconnected, I think.
No, I really like that perspective of planting the seeds and cultivating, because you can't control the outcome of many things. I mean, for example, I have a client who wants to launch a new service and she's very stuck. And and she's not launching it because she's worried about how many people might sign up for this, how many people will do it. And I keep going, well, you're not making any money by not launching the service. And there's a whole bunch of emotional ties up to why she's not doing it. But if she puts it out there and launches it, but the second step of it too, which I think was in your statement, was not just to put it out there and let it drop. You still have to cultivate it and help it grow. You still have to water it and feed it. And I think that's a wonderful analogy of letting your services or letting whatever you do. Because I know I've been guilty of launching something and not doing anything with it. So I'm not cultivating, I'm not growing it, I'm not nurturing it. It just kind of goes plump and you go, okay, that didn't work.
My favorite is to say that I've launched something and then realize that I've told, 3 people and sent 2 emails about it over the course. I'm like, well, not really.
Exactly.
And there's also, so the other thing that I think I've learned is, and it goes back to that curiosity piece, but, I remember growing up and it was all about, play to your strengths, right? What are you really good at? And the trick is that those strengths kind of become very comfort zone-y. I'm really good at reaching out in all the same ways to all the same people. So one of the things I've learned to really value is brainstorming and letting myself be creative, but from a place, so I'll backtrack. The brainstorming, yes, but doing all of these things and any of the things on the to-do list, first having to be fueled by tuning into me. So it goes back to that inner voice, but I have to be really connected to me to make sure that those things are coming from a place that's deeper within me instead of my mind and those internal shoulds. So the brainstorming, all of those things, making sure that they're coming from this, what would feel delicious, what would feel joyful, what what might be really fun. And not all of those things are going to lead to something or actually be realistic, but allowing myself to just get into that creative flow of brainstorming and seeing what emerges.
I love the words you choose to say. What would feel delicious? It's just like, that's such an empowering thought of what would feel delicious to do. I never used that one before in a work, Tim, but that is
feel free.
a wonderful, wonderful way to put it, because that just makes you feel the positivity of what you're doing, not the nobody will buy this. I'm just like everybody else. There's nobody out there. There's no room for me in the market space. Why would all those words that flow in our heads?
Yes, which are real, right? Or not. But yeah, we feel them like they're real. Yeah.
It's the old adage of feel the fear and do it anyways.
Yes. And I think maybe this also comes into learning. I think the realization for me that there are all of the, the marketing, the to-dos and all of the things out there. But at the very end of the day, I think that most of my business building actually comes from mindset work. You and I were talking about this briefly before, but it is cultivating a mindset where there can be expansion.
What's the one most important message you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation of being a woman entrepreneur?
That you truly you don't need any special equipment. You don't need all the special courses, the certifications. I mean, those things are all fabulous, but at the very core of you have everything you need already inside you, in that inner strength and wisdom, and that tuning into that might just be the magic and the sunrise that you need.
Next are highlights from a really fun interview with 2 Feet. And the interview is about stepping into your spotlight. I love the way that you say that, because I hear often people talk about telling their stories. And I like you use the word color. And I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it individually. What pops for each of us is not necessarily just the story. It's how we express it and how we tell it and how involved we are in it.
And the other part of that is that you should know, listeners, that there is a story there. Like, so many people come to me and say, yeah, Sophie, I've heard of your reputation, and I've heard you can find, the color in anybody or the whatever, but sorry, with me, you're not going to find, and, everyone's got it. I mean, if we have time, I can give you another quick example of that, another client. So I had another client who, I would meet her at networking meetings occasionally, and she had a graphic design business. I don't know, they did brochures and websites and books and, different cards, whatever, different things, right? And one of the very long list of things that she said she did was books, right? And I said to her, listen, everything else you've described, everybody and his brother does it. Books, not everybody does it. No, nowadays more people do, but at that time, not everybody did that, right? So I said, why don't we just focus on that one thing and say that you make books, number one. So she actually changed her business name to wemakebooks.ca, which was great. And she had this gold colored plate put on her bricks and mortar business that says We Make Books. But secondly, we wrote her this 30-second infomercial that we found her story, right? So I asked, where were you born? Where were you brought up? She was born in the Swiss Alps, and she lived on top of a mountain in a 600-year-old farmhouse. This is something she had never told anybody, but when I dug, I found it. And she used to have to go down the valley to the library that was at the bottom and take out her favorite book. And I said to her, wouldn't it be cool if we said your favorite book was Heidi, right? And the reason I said that was because her name, my client, was Heidi. And she said, Sophie, it really was. So that was a score, right? So anyway, so she went to networking meetings and she started telling in 30 seconds her story of, she grew up on the Swiss Alps and she loved reading, but she didn't own any books. She had to go to the library and And now in this twist of fate, she helps people make books. And again, she told me, line up with people waiting to speak to her. Whereas before she's saying, yeah, we make websites, we make brochures. Now she can still do all that other stuff once they're in the door. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're competent and credible to deliver, you can deliver. But you have to have a label on that doorway. And that's something else that I tell, the entrepreneurs in your audience, take a piece of paper and draw all the doorways. So like, for example, you said about me, Heather, that I have all these, that I do all these different businesses. And I guess if I want to break it down that way, you're right. I teach people to get publicity. I teach people about speaking. I teach people about comedy. I teach people to write the 30-second networking infomercial. I coach them about branding, or, I could make, and I'm a singer and an actress and comedian, all these things. So I could make 15 or 20 of those, right? But if I want people to walk in my door, I can't have 20 doors. right? I have to have one door, and I have to put all my energy and attention into getting people to come into that one door. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want it to say on that one door? So for me, finally, after years of figuring this out, and it's the subtitle of my book is A Guide to Getting Noticed. So my door is about getting noticed, right? Now, once you come in my door, we might choose to do it through publicity, through speaking, through humor, through writing a book. I have a 10-week course on how you write a book, but I didn't start there, and I would never do that as a solo thing because everybody and his dog is teaching courses on how to write a book now. So again, it wouldn't make me stand out, right?
Right.
But through this one door, it's kind of like those old movies. Heather, I don't know if you remember those old movies where, it was like in the 40s or 50s, you'd see this movie and the guy goes to a ticket booth to buy a ticket at a train, right? And he goes to that ticket booth and the guy behind the booth says, you can't buy the ticket here. This is the information booth, right? The ticket booth is 3 doors down. So the guy walks 3 doors down to the ticket booth to buy the ticket. And who's there?
The same guy.
Same guy. Okay. So that's kind of how we are in our businesses, right? It's the same guy, but there's different doors.
Right. I
So
love that.
to your listeners, I would say, decide, you can have 20 things that you sell, but figure out what the umbrella is, figure out what it says on the door, and then get people in that door.
What would you want to leave? What golden nugget would you leave with?
This is something that I say when I speak live, so it's not going to have the same effect here, but one of the things that I learned both as a lawyer in court and an entertainer on stage is that you have to know when to sit down and shut up. So usually when I speak live, I just sit down and shut up at this point, and I don't say another word. And I could do that now, but I just kind of want to explain it because it came out of context, right? The point is, saying more doesn't always sell them more, right? You have to just really figure out what your value is, put it out there in a compelling way, and then let them come to you. Don't go chasing them with like a spoon of chicken soup and say, taste my soup. You got to make them dying of thirst for whatever you've got.
Next up are highlights from episode 12, Leading a Joyful Life with Marina Pearson.
But as they say, give me boundaries to set me free. And so, it's all part of the same thing for me, which is how can you support how can the business or your project support you to lead the lifestyle that you want? And that includes, systems and processes. It includes being efficient with your time. It also includes getting clarity on how you would love your lifestyle to look, because it's not the same for everybody.
Absolutely. But I love your concept about systems and processes. And one thing I like to advise people to do is to outsource everything but your own voice. So you still want to be, and I know with your podcast or anything like that, you're still the voice of your podcast. And if you're blogging, you're still the voice of the content, but that doesn't mean you need to be posting it and doing all the back end and production and all that stuff.
No, and I don't. I get to do the juicy stuff that I love, which is sharing the message that I have. And I also have found, have found a geek in me, which I didn't even know I had. And I love, just to sit with my Excel sheet and go through my own personal finances. Like there's something really satisfying about that for me. When it comes to, having to put my taxes in. I love it. I love just sitting in the back there and doing the back end stuff and getting all geeky about it. So it's been really interesting because I had identified myself as someone who doesn't do that. I'd identified myself as, or made up the fact that I was definitely not one of those people, that I was this outgoing, creative, boho. I sort of coined this phrase, which is, capitalist hippie that is a free spirit but has money. But I've also discovered that sort of way of seeing myself was actually limiting what I can actually do, because there is this geek that loves to put order into chaos, which is so weird for me to say that, because I used to be the chaos whirlwind of chaos. You'd come into my bedroom and it would be, you couldn't be able to get in because it was just piles of clothes everywhere. And now you come in and it's really neat and tidy, and my cupboards are really neat and tidy, and my house is not necessarily so, because I've got a 4-year-old, but
to me, it sounds like those are almost the stories we tell ourselves, right? So we tell ourselves these stories, and then it almost limits ourselves. As you just gave a wonderful example of, you had an image and a story that you were telling yourself, and that's how we are supposed to fit in. But when you let go of that story, it's allowing you to recreate a new story about yourself, new story about where you're going to go.
It was interesting because it wasn't like I consciously set out to challenge myself on, I have a story about not being good at this, so I'm going to do it. It was more like, well, actually that makes sense to me to do it. And even though there's a lot of resistance, I'm still going to sit here and do it anyway and see what happens. And as a result, surprised me in the fact that I've discovered a new part of that I didn't know existed, or that I could get excited about. So, and also the other thing, it really plays towards my sort of facilitator teacher aspect, because if you've got a team, you need to train them. So it's almost like I hadn't seen that either, that somehow that I can facilitate or train people in my business. They don't have to just be clients, so that was something else that I got to see recently.
That's good though. I mean, what I love in that, and I think it really gets me excited, is that we're not one thing, and we can be many things not only as we go through, but as we age and as we bring in our life experiences and our wisdom and everything else. It doesn't mean we have to be what we were before. The last one is what's the one most important message you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation?
It's funny, like it's just come to mind, really unexpected. Have fun, and don't take life too seriously.
Our next highlight and tip is from Karen Tripty, episode 14, Pay Yourself First. What's been your biggest challenge?
I think dealing with myself is probably the honest answer. Dealing with my own mindset, keeping myself out of the critical voice, letting myself learn, acknowledge what I've already learned, just acknowledging over and over again that I'm human and that I'm going to make mistakes. And just learning how to be sweet and loving to myself and not beat myself up for those inevitable mistakes which come when you're learning.
Absolutely. And if you didn't make mistakes, you wouldn't necessarily learn.
True.
So there's an analogy I've shared on other shows, but I just love this. There was a woman speaking here a number of months back who was a high jumper in the Olympics.
Oh my.
And her comment was to young girls, and I think this is important to all of us, is that in their sport, they only win when everybody fails. So when no one can jump any higher, that's when the winners are declared.
Wow.
But everybody has to fail, and they're constantly trying to jump higher, and they're constantly failing because they're always trying to exceed their best. And I thought, her point was that she learns the most by trying and failing and trying and failing. And that's how she became an Olympic pole jumper, was because she went from being just, trying and then fascinated with the sports, but every single day she's trying, and she wins by being the last person to fail. And it is a really good analogy onto life that, yes, we're going to fail and we're going to learn and we're going to grow from there.
I can identify with that because I actually trained with an Olympic coach. I was quite a swimmer back in the day, and I swam in the All Japan Nationals.
Cool.
But what that sport really taught me was that to compete against myself. So that was a real blessing, because if I shaved a second off of my time, I mean, I did come out with a lot of gold medals, but if I shaved a second off of my time, then that's a victory. And so I think really we have to look at that in business too. Like, okay, if we learned one new skill, if we learned how to do the email, or we learned how to do follow-up, which is another bugaboo for me, to be good about following up, because I grew up in Japan. So much of my personality is soft and submissive from having grown up in that country and not wanting to bother anybody. But I've worked with coaches, and I've also learned that the fortune's in the follow-up. So it's something important to do.
And the last one is, what's the one most important message you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Repetition is great. Pay yourself first.
So we're halfway through all of the episodes with these wonderful women that I've had such a privilege to interview. We're on to episode number 16, and it's a very special episode called Tears to Treasures with Michelle Dorin. And Michelle's business is in a very difficult topic and a difficult niche. And that's why I think it's so important to share her story and her advice. Excellent. I want to talk a bit about like your very unique expertise and your very unique business, which I think is amazing. What were the difficulties of creating a business around such a sensitive topic?
So challenging. First of all, because I feel like I've had so many things come up for myself that wanted to just kind of hold me back from actually helping people in this area, because it's something that people are not really willing to openly discuss or talk about. And it's something that they've pushed down for so long, so far down, that they don't really want to bring it up. You know, when the feelings come up, they want to keep suppressing them. I think of the word depressed, because they suppress them, and that causes and leads to depression. And so my whole purpose and passion is, I don't want to see people. I've literally seen women who did not want to keep on living anymore after their abortion. And I would go to their house. I would see them lying on the sofa, not wanting to get up, not wanting to live anymore. And that's what drove my heart to feel like this needs to stop. If I can help women to not feel this way, and I know I can, then I will do that no matter what, you know. And so that is what led me to want to do the work so much. But the challenge is that it is something that it's not an excitement thing. It's not a happy thing. So that's the challenging part, is just that it's a very emotional, and not just one emotion. It's a complex emotional. It's like so many emotions and so many feelings and so many thoughts. And the society is giving them so many negative connotation, negative words around abortion, that they just are caused to feel so much shame and so much guilt and so much pain, and they don't know what to do with it. So that's the hard part of it.
Yeah, I would think marketing to that. I mean, you have a positive end of the marketing, which is, which is the benefit of resolving and coming to terms with, for lack of a better word, and getting comfortable with the decisions in life and being able to grieve, I'm sure, is part of the process that people need to go through. But do you find, how do other business people accept or listen to when you say what you do? What reaction do you get from other people?
The reaction I get from people ever since I started, they say, oh, wow, this is so needed. This is such a needed niche. Yeah, you know, when that's what the response that I get from other business people, from other people who possibly and most likely have not been through it. So I appreciate that. That's actually what keeps me going through the hard times, is those encouraging comments. But you know, the challenging part is that the women and the men who've actually had abortions, like, they're not the ones who at first say that, like, oh, wow, this is a great thing you're doing, you know, because they're hurting, like they don't see it yet. And that is the challenge of it. But I am a transformation coach. So I take them from their painful tears, and then that through our process, they are transformed. So they transform a negative experience, or experience filled with a lot of pain and negative thoughts, to something that is a beautiful memory of their baby. So I help transform something that has caused them so much pain, so much tears, into a more positive, more lightful, more filled with love, because abortion is usually chosen and going through out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's basically like everything else in life. It's gone from fear to love. They hate themselves after abortion, and I help them love themselves again. I help them forgive themselves again. I help them to see their worth again, and that they are not the person who had an abortion. Like, they went through an abortion experience, that does not make them who they are.
Right. What's the important message you would leave for a woman entrepreneur? Based on your experiences and where you're at, what message would you like to leave with other women entrepreneurs who are ready for more in their business?
For the woman entrepreneur who's ready for more, I say go for it. Go for it. Whatever it is, if you're feeling led and your heart and your passion and your gut is telling you to do something and you're scared as heck, go for it.
So one of the beauties about a podcast is the ability to meet people from all over the world. So episode number 18 is The Power of Systems and Numbers with Carolyn Wood, who's from Australia. What would you give advice to another woman who is ready for more? So they're in business and they are ready and they want to grow it, both from your expertise point of view and from your experience point of view. What advice would you give them?
I think from experience, it's almost just, and it, applies to, so I talk about systems, and for me, systems are all about simplifying your business so that things happen automatically, but you aren't chasing people for things, that, you have questionnaires in place so that you're ready when clients are on the phone, so you're prepared. But for me, it's also about simplifying your business. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before with those shoulds. It's like, if you're spreading yourself thin, I see it so much, people spreading themselves thin, as you say, over so many social media networks. Look at your numbers and see which social media network is working for you, and focus on that one social media network and maybe one other. But really, for me, growing your business is really about doubling down on what's working and letting go of what's not.
Love that.
And that's where I see the numbers really coming in, that they tell you what they really help you to work out what is working, where you're getting your traffic from, where people are finding you. And a lot of times it's things like referrals and testimonials, those type of things. So it's about, how do you get much better at asking people for that referral? So, that's what you focus on, rather than trying to be on 5 different social media platforms, picking up clients. It's really getting to know your business better, so you know where to focus your efforts.
I love that. You have so much depth in what you just said, which is that sense of, well, it is. It's about, particularly if you're in business because you have a passion for what you do, sometimes you don't actually get to know your business. And I think that statement, which I've never heard it phrased that way, but I love that, is you have to know your business. You have to be the CEO of your business. You have to be the CEO of that, but you also have to know your business. And until you have a CFO, you need to be the chief financial officer of your business as well. Yeah. But a lot of people, because as I said earlier, I did a whole number series on know your numbers and how you can double your income by tweaking everything by 10%. But I'd love to delve down a bit into that comment about know your systems, because when I say that, or when I hear that, a lot of people go, ugh, and they shy away. A lot of women shy away from this. I don't know how to do systems, but you captured very quickly that systems don't have to be complicated.
No.
And they don't have to be some automated process. So can you delve a bit more into what you mean by systems and knowing your systems and how they can help a business?
Yeah, so for me, a system is more just the process you follow, and you have do things the same way every time, so that you're not, I see a lot of people wasting time because they're reinventing the wheel every time they get a new client on. So for me, a system is just like, okay, I've got a new client. There's someone who's interested in working with me, and it's just documenting. That means I need to send out a contract to her. I need to send her an invoice. And then I'm going to send her, say, if you're a web designer, you're going to have a standard questionnaire that you send out to her, so that your client, so that you get all the logons that you need and all the information you need in one hit. So you're not constantly going back saying, oh, sorry, I forgot to ask you, I also need this. Do you have your branding in place? Yes. If not, then I'm not ready to work with you. You need to go talk to a branding specialist. Mm-hmm. So it's having having that questionnaire in place so that you're collecting everything you need in one spot, so that when you start, you've got everything you need and you can just get going with what you're really good at, which is designing a website. And, so that's a fairly simple process. And you might, yes, I'd say automate sending out a contract and an invoice and how that questionnaire gets to them. But that's actually very simple to set up. There's a lot of, inexpensive software that's out there now that you can use to put that in place, a very simple workflow. And if you don't want to go through a workflow, on a workflow system, it's even just saying, okay, to send out my contracts, I'm going to use something like, say, HelloSign. And I know I send my invoices using PayPal and I've got a template saved. And then the questionnaire, I've just got something set up in Typeform that is free, and it's about having template emails set up as well, so you're not rewriting every single email. You've got an email that you send out with that questionnaire. You might personalize it slightly. And I think, that's one of the great things about having template emails is that you've got the standard stuff you need to ask already set out. You're not rethinking things. And then you can add that really lovely personal touch, just say that someone has, we were talking earlier about that you've got a standard poodle, just asking a simple question about how your pup is, just adds that personal element and makes clients feel that they've been listened to and appreciated. And you've had the time to think about those questions because the standard email with all the information that you need is written there, sitting there. So you can spend time thinking about your clients and being a real person with them rather than some automated robot that just, okay, what do I have to ask this person on this email? Banging that out. You've got more time to actually think about connecting with people.
What's the most important message you'd like to leave our listeners?
For me, it's that you shouldn't be afraid of your numbers, that you need to come to grips with them if you're going to be serious about your business, that you have to understand the numbers. And yes, you can outsource a lot of that work, but the key numbers you as a business owner need to understand to really step up into a role of being a CEO.
What has been the most important thing you've learned? So you've been in business for 12 years, you've been running this. What's the most important thing that you've learned?
I don't know that I could say the most important thing because I think there are so many important things. So I'll probably share more than one. I think it's really important that you truly believe in the product that you're offering or the service that you're offering, and that you're doing it from a desire to be of help and of service, and not, just from money. I think it's really important to get the right support system in place from a practical perspective. And one of the things I learned through Roger Hamilton's work, who teaches entrepreneurs how to be entrepreneurs, is that you always need at least a team of 3. And according to his profiling system, you can work out exactly what role that person should be. So for me, for example, I need an admin person and I need a finance person. And because I'm what is called a creator profile, so I have lots of ideas and I'm very forward thinking, but I need that admin and admin support and financial guidance. So I haven't actually achieved that yet. I'm still doing most of it by myself with an occasional bit of, actually this is not true. I do have a great accountant, so it's not true. But I'd like to solidify my team, better than it is at the moment. But I've really learned that and I really get it. So having a team is really important. And also having emotional support is incredibly important, because that's one of the things that's been the biggest lack in my life, is not having emotional support, which is why I do the work that I do. Because if we are encouraged and supported emotionally and mentally, that is what gives us the ability to continue on, especially through those difficult times. And if we don't have that, then it's only us trying to give it to ourselves, and that can be really exhausting. And it's interesting because the word encouragement comes from the word cœur, which is a French word. You probably know that being in Canada, which means heart. And so when we encourage somebody, we give heart and we help them to strengthen their heart. And I read a quote the other day I can't remember it exactly, but by Dean Ornish, who is quite a well-known doctor, saying that, the most important thing for health is not, supplements, food, diet, exercise, whatever. It is love and support.
What's the one most important message you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation?
Just to be true to oneself and to look after oneself and to really understand oneself. And that means more than just, our physical body and our personality. It's about getting to our true self and being guided by that.
Okay, now we're on to the highlights of episode 22 with Tracy Hopper. It's all about your personal brand and bringing your personal brand to your business. Love to know a bit more about what you're doing and how it would apply to my audience of 40 plus women.
It's a lot to do with personal brand. So, I help women to find a look that is going to really help to propel their business. So we do some Skype work about body shape and personality and all the rest of it. But the entrepreneurial women are busy. They don't have time to faff around trying to figure out, I've got meetings here, there and everywhere.
Can see that. And one of the things you mentioned very early on was that we are visual now, like to really get our business, videos, Facebook Lives, whatever your business is, there's a visual element.
Yes.
And we can be in our pajamas on the bottom.
Yes, we can.
And what do we do on the top? It's really funny because I have a pile of jewelry here sometimes.
Yes.
So I'll be like, because I do my Facebook Lives quite spontaneously. So it'll be like, oh, what do I look like? Oh, better put on some jewelry. I have a jacket over there. So I dress myself up for when I know my video is going to go live. What would a few really pieces of advice about when you're doing that? What kind of things would you advise someone to look at or to think about?
Okay, I actually have put together a freebie called How to Look Good on Video. So I can answer this very easily because I've already done the research, which actually I'm going to run a challenge to lead it into the virtual wardrobe, which all kind of fits together really well. So in terms of Facebook Lives and live video of any sort, as you said, we're only talking about waist up at the most, probably chest up. So you only have to worry about the top half. Wear clothes that are not busy with pattern because you want people to look at you, not what you're wearing. So that's one tip. Also, I have seen somebody very cleverly, in a way, wear her brand colours, but her background was also her brand colours, so she disappeared.
Okay.
Disappeared. So have a think about the colours. You don't want to clash, but you don't want to disappear into the background either. I would also suggest, and I think this is probably my key tip, is to spend some time before you suddenly think, I'm going to do a Facebook Live. Spend some time, put aside an hour or so to go through your wardrobe and to pick out 5 tops that when you put them up against you, try them on, put them up against you, and look in a mirror with a critical eye and see, what does that colour top do for me? Does it light my face up or does it drain me? Because when you're on a Facebook Live, you want people, you need to look, attractive isn't the right word, but appealing. You need to look like you're animated, like you're lit up, you're passionate about what you're talking about. And video and camera can be very harsh. So, look in a mirror and see really realistically what's it doing to your face. Is it making you look younger? Is it making you look older? And pick out 5 tops that put them in a separate part of your wardrobe that okay, I'm going to do a video, Facebook Live or video, I'll go and grab one of those 5 tops. And the job's done for you in advance then. You can even put your jewelry around the ones that it works with or something like that.
I've done that. I've done where I'm sitting in today, because we're not live showing the video, I'm wearing a nice cozy sweater. That's not my best color. I have actually gone and switched shirts, put it on for Facebook Live, and then gone back and put it back up so that it's clean, because I don't need it to be that day. So I've done that.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of what that framing is.
Yes, and I know another thing I would say is, I know not everybody is a fan of wearing makeup every day, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to say anybody should be wearing makeup if they don't want to, but cameras they drain you, they bleach your face completely. And so a little bit of makeup is going to make you look healthier and, you know, more sort of alive, really. So I would, you know, if you're going to do an impromptu one, that's great. You know, we don't want to stop people doing impromptu Facebook lives because they're often the best. But if you've got a minute to think about it, a little bit of makeup just to give your face some colour is a good thing. So yeah, hope there's a few tips there that would be quite helpful for people.
And the last one is, what's the most important message you'd like to leave with our listeners about being an entrepreneurial woman 40 plus?
I can't think of one. I can think of two. Be yourself. Be yourself, and find the right group of people to support you on this journey. And, you know, the right community that are going to have your back.
And continuing our trip around the world, the next guest is Yasmin Carter, who is from Singapore, and our topic was the art of selling, episode number 24.
The other one that I do with more tiny businesses is called the sales story method, because a lot of times when it comes to selling, people don't realize it, but it's actually just telling a story. And if you have had kids, you are actually phenomenal at sales. Like, you may not even realize that, but telling your kid on why they should eat their like vegetables, or why they should follow the rules, that is like persuasion and selling in the most subtle form. But most people are just like, oh no, I suck. I was like, actually, no one really sucks. You're selling all the time.
And it's funny because I think women in particular have a real mindset that they've established somewhere along, who knows why, that we can't sell, right? We don't want to be sales. We don't want to be salesy, as the word says it. We don't want to have that. And I find I get a lot of women who are very hesitant on that sales component of it.
Yeah.
Which is that they don't want to be salesy. And it's like, no, if you don't sell, you can't probably be in business. So you need to have money. It's that whole system thing that needs to happen. So that's great.
Yeah. And I think also for me as well, like what I'm noticing is people think that sales is a dirty word. And there's a very big thing that's different in terms of how you perceive selling and how selling can be. So most people perceive it as a slimy, sleazy, like sales card dude who's like selling weird shit, versus like when you go to a favorite store, like for example, and then you're like, even like I love, for example, Apple products. When they call me and say like, oh, we have a new product, like I am not upset that they called me. I'm like, thank you very much. Like, I'm so excited to go to the store. I want to see the newest gadgets. I'm excited about seeing those things, versus if I get some random cold call from an insurance agent that I'm like, I don't know who you are. Why do you have my number? And why do you exist, kind of thing.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think one of the things I tell a lot of my clients to do is look at the successes out there, you know, look at grocery stores, for example. They have some phenomenal, easy selling methods. They don't, they have buy one, get one free day. They have whatever, but they have a consistency that they use to get people to come to their store. And there's a lot of really good advertising and sales examples that people can follow that aren't sleazy. That aren't, and the used car salesman is always the ultimate sleaziness that we think of for some reason. And yet, I bought my car from a used car salesman who's exactly the opposite of sleazy. Yeah. It's like, here's the keys, go, you can have my car and come back when you want, kind of thing. And completely the opposite. And they're one of the better car dealers because they chose to do it in a different way.
Yeah.
What's the most important message you'd like to leave our listeners about being a woman entrepreneur, about being someone who's ready for more in your business?
You are freaking amazing. Like, in case you forget, you are amazing. You can make things happen that will really change and transform the world.
Next, highlights from episode 26, Embrace Your Strengths with Nicole Burgess. In hindsight, what would you have avoided or done differently?
That is a good question. I think some of my systems that I have in place now, I would have liked to have implemented them sooner rather than waiting. If I go back to really kind of how I started everything with my therapy practice, I did a lot of back and forth with emailing and calling people for scheduling. And now I have everything through an encrypted system where it's all right there. And it just makes things so much simpler and doesn't waste is a lot of time with the phone calls or the emailing back and forth. So putting some systems into place at the beginning would have been more helpful.
I love that. That's some of my upcoming topics actually on the podcast is systems that they don't have to be complicated.
Yes.
Fact, and they don't actually have to be automated either.
Mm-hmm.
If you recognize that you're doing the same thing over and over again, then create a handwritten system about that over and over again and start following it, because the more you can do it, the more you can repeat it, the easier it is to eventually automate it or give it to someone else to do.
Yes. Yes to both.
And it makes a difference. When I started this podcast, I actually ended up launching it about a month later than I had anticipated, but I wrote down the systems to how from when I book somebody, and then I actually have a whole system written about from as soon as I stop recording my podcast, how that goes from that to production and all the steps that I need to do. And it's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's made it very efficient, and it's I'm not reinventing the wheel or thinking about it. I just go through my checklist and it's done.
I think that's the biggest piece of it. What you just said there too, right? Is not having to rethink about it or like, oh, I just modified that. Oh, wait, was that the next step? It's like, it's right there. And then you don't have to put a lot of energy into it because you just follow that along.
Yes. And that's exactly the value of doing it. So checklists and systems are a great way to move things along.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, would have you done anything differently or avoided doing anything?
No, I've heard this question on, and I can't remember somebody's podcast, probably a year or two ago. Like, would you have changed something, a while back? And the person who was being interviewed said, no, because, this is how I got to where I am today. And I sat there with that response and I'm like, well, no, I would have changed this. But when they responded to it, I'm like, no, I actually resonate more with what they were saying, that I needed to go down the path that I was on, because if I tried to do it differently or at a different time, I wasn't ready for it, wasn't open to it. And so all the steps that I've been through and the turnarounds and the detours and getting back on track was exactly what I needed to go through to get to where I am today. So no, I wouldn't have changed anything.
And I love that. And I think that's an important message for anybody who's listening to this, is that every step we take is a path and part of our learning process, failures or successes. And the last one is, what's the most important message you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation?
To be you, to do what really does light you up, and keep taking those small steps to follow that dream and that passion that you have, even if the naysayers are like, it's not possible, you can't do this, you're too old, you're too sensitive, you're too whatever. That's their fears. You be you, all of you, and show up every day.
And our last episode from the first 30 episodes with my wonderful 14 guests is episode 28, Making a Business Out of Being Creative, with Lisa Murray. Go.
I think it's so true what you're saying. And because I am 51 and I'm literally like, okay, I'm ready to go now. Nothing and no one gets in my way. And it's been, I think, 10 years of moving towards that. And this is probably one thing I do want to say in this thing. Of course, we want more, but we have to allow it to come in the ways it can come. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people, think that when people are doing well, they have an overnight success. But what I can see is I have circled around topics for years, and then all of a sudden they're ready to be there in the world as part of what I'm teaching, and I think that this thing of the more, we've been taught not to want more, not to ask more, to settle, basically. And I just think there's so much in not settling. I talked to someone a little while back about money, and she said to me, you don't have a money mindset problem. Because I've always thought I didn't have a money mindset problem, but I was like, I like more money, And she said to me, you have a settling for less problem. And talk about, being slapped in the face with a wet fish. I was just like, oh my gosh, I do. And it's been so interesting. That was maybe 6 months ago. And so much has changed in that time as I've looked at all the ways that I've been settling for less. So I think your topic is so timely and so important.
And that what you just said is very thought-provoking. I'm thinking, I might actually resonate a little bit with that.
Yeah.
But it is, one of the things I find a lot with women entrepreneurs, and I've coached many who will say that, oh, my business is making money. I'm like, are you paying yourself? Well, no. well, then your business isn't making money. And so there's so much passion around their topic that they forget that they deserve to make a living, to be more than make a living with their business. They shouldn't be doing it for free. Then it's a charity, not a business, and they deserve to make money, and they deserve to be paid for their expertise, their wisdom, their art, their creativity, or whatever it may be. They deserve that. And that's something I find a lot of times getting people to accept that they deserve that is part of it too.
Yeah. You know, I think I've made a business out of being paid to be creative.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. But it was very deliberate, because when I had the burnout, one of the things was that I came to that was probably the first thing I came to. Like, well, people always talked about self-care, but self-care wasn't making virtually any difference to me, you know? And so I looked at, well, what else do I need to add in here? And the creativity was a big part of that. And I remember in the very early days writing down, and I found it years later, writing down what would it take to get paid for writing? Because I didn't know I was a good writer. I just knew that I needed to write and that, you know, it would be great if someone paid me for it. And literally within about 2 years, there was a company that paid me for years to write for them. And ultimately it was pretty much my choice that I stopped. And they paid me to write to the energy of things, which was absolutely marvelous because I had a lot of creative freedom in that. And I still have clients that pay me for that. They're just different clients now, you know, and I do it for the pleasure of it as much as for the getting paid. So I think there's something really important in asking for what you truly want, because that was something that I really, truly desired.
And the last one is, what's the most important message you'd like to leave our listeners to take away for women who are entrepreneurs, who are in their 40s and 50s, who want more?
Yeah, my sense is it really is finding the joy, and literally that comes from trusting yourself and knowing that every single choice you make makes a difference somehow. And when you actually put those two things together and start to trust your choices, the joy has to come.
So that's the end of this highlight reel from the first 30 episodes and the first 14 guests that I had. I hope you enjoyed the highlights and the advice that each of these women gave you. And if you want to listen to any of their episodes in more depth, you can go to my website, igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore, and search on their episodes, or you can do igniteyourmarket.com/RFM, the number of the episode. So for example, episode 26 would be 026. I'm so excited to bring more amazing women to you in the next 30 episodes that I'll be doing. And thank you so much for being listeners. If you like what you hear, please rate and review, and come and join our group on Facebook, the Ready for More Women's Business Circle. It's an amazing group of women who are really trying to help each other and lift each other up. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ready for More podcast. You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. My name is Heather Cameron. I'm your podcast host. And when I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm busy working with entrepreneurial women like you who are ready for more in their business and are looking to get focused on their own unique path to success. You can find more about myself and my programs at www.igniteyourmarket.com. If you like what you heard, feel free to rate, review, and share with your friends. And don't miss an episode by subscribing. Until next time, remember, now is the best time to focus on your more and be inspired by your own unique gifts.